Welcome to the latest roundup of news and polls from Ipsos MORI. And one key thing to report this month is a surge in economic optimism in Britain. The British public now, by some margin, believe that the economy will improve over the next year, and with unlocking, they're probably right. And incidentally, this is the British public at one of their more positive points that we've seen since we began this series back in the 1970s. They're not completely sure that unlocking will happen on the 21st of June, and confidence in that happening has fallen from around 3/4 to around 6 in 10. But nevertheless, they tend to think it will happen. And even if it doesn't happen on the 21st of June and is delayed for a few weeks, we know that the public will tend to support the government because by a margin of about 3-1, the public tends to believe that government measures currently are not strict enough rather than too strict as it is. Overall, 8 out of 10 people continue to say they're happy with the way the government's performing on vaccinations as Britain surges ahead in the global league table of how many have been achieved out of our population. Only 1 in 10 dissatisfied. And as I've remarked previously, this is one of the highest scores for any government in Britain at any time on anything. So some real credit where credit's due on the vaccination programme. When we look at what people think of different politicians' handling of the outbreak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who has given away billions in furlough money, is still regarded as the one who's done best, followed quite closely by the Prime Minister and then the Health Secretary. But Keir Starmer has seen his ratings on this fall markedly, halving over the last year, and fewer than one person in five, 17%, now says that Keir Starmer is handling the virus well in his role as leader of the opposition. And indeed, overall dissatisfaction with Keir Starmer has more than doubled since he first became leader of the Labour Party just a year ago. So he faces some real challenges. And when we look at his image versus Boris Johnson, you can see that he is more likely to be seen as more honest than Boris Johnson by 29% compared to 22%. But the challenge is that honesty is generally not what gets you to become Prime Minister in our 40 years of looking at these types of issues with different political leaders. And instead, it's the clear leads that Boris Johnson has in particular on being good in a crisis and a capable leader. You might think he's incompetent, but 40% say he's a capable leader. Only 26% think Keir Starmer is. And that, and having a lot of personality, giving us confidence in Britain's future, being patriotic, mean that many, many more people would tend to choose Boris Johnson as leader of the country than Keir Starmer in a straight choice. And so after a month of febrile speculation about the impact of Dominic Cummings' revelations and indeed accusations at the Health Secretary, we first of all see that the Conservative Party has actually extended its lead in the polls in the last month. The lead has gone up to 9 points. And indeed, when we asked the public who they trusted more, Matt Hancock, who was subject to a whole set of quite vitriolic accusations from Dominic Cummings, or indeed Mr. Cummings himself, by 2-1, they plumped for Matt Hancock. Although it's fair to say that a third, of course, say they trust neither of them. 7% don't know who they are. Overall, though, the public want the inquiry to start this year rather than next. I suspect the government will just cheerfully brush that aside. They've decided on next year. Their lead in the polls, if anything, is going up. But certainly the public is keen to see the inquiry begin. And then we've also looked at where Britain is in the world. Brexit negotiations with the European Union we thought were finished, but they're rumbling on over Northern Ireland. So are we going to punch above our weight as we host the G7? And by 2-1 or more, people want Britain to be a force for good in the world. It's down slightly since the Brexit vote, but the sentiment is clear. Similarly, we want Britain, even though it's not economically or as military strong as some countries, to punch above its weight in world affairs. And again, down 10 points since the Brexit vote. But overall, by more than 2-1, we aspire to be important on the global stage. The Prime Minister has often talked about global Britain. And so we've looked at whether we think that in 20 years' time, will we be, as Vladimir Putin sometimes calls us, a small island that nobody pays any attention to? Well, a quarter think that in 20 years' time we'll be like that. But many more of us believe that we will still be an important country playing a big role in the world. There are some big differences by voting intention. Conservatives much more optimistic about our great role in world affairs in 20 years' time. Labour much more equivocal, but not much difference by age. So again, the general sentiment of the British public is that we should punch above our weight. In Britain, using our knowledge panel, we've looked in detail at how ethnic minority Britons regard the police versus white Britons. And a pattern that we will have probably seen for some time is that many more people in the white community see the police as trustworthy and honest, or fair than indeed in the ethnic minority community. And indeed, 31% of ethnic minority respondents in our work describe the police as racist. So that figure may have declined over the years, but it still just shows that the police have an uphill struggle in engaging, particularly with young people, because a third of people at school these days are now black or Asian or another ethnic minority. That's all for this week. Do look at our website for more. There's much, much more there. And I look forward to seeing you at one of our webinars online soon. Thank you.